Thank you. Hi.
Hi all.
How are you, Pat?
Good, good. I'm just looking for the meeting. I don't know why it's disappeared off my screen. I'll get it back.
Oh, well, thank you for saving me again. I was sure I had, anyway, it doesn't matter. We can talk about it later.
Well, it happens.
All the time with me, and you always save me, so thank you.
That's my job. That's my job.
John was just laughing. So that's part of the performance criteria then going forward, right? When we look at applications?
What have I done with my Zoom? Okay, sorry. It's just gone right away. Okay, never mind.
What I can see of you is a beautiful sunset logo.
Yeah, I haven't put my video on yet, but okay, I'm just gonna do this. How's that? No, that's not it. There, okay.
Here comes Tracy.
Oh, there's Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Yay. You got a speaker.
Hi, Tracy.
Hello, sorry, I've joined a little bit early.
Well, don't be sorry about that. I'm Deb Gill. I'm the chair of the Sunset Community Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this very important issue. Yeah, it'll be fun, I think.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, a pleasure. Pat, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, I was just saying to Tracy that although separated by decades, we both got our career starts at King's.
Oh. I was happy to see that she was a teacher, for heaven's sakes. That's just right after my own heart.
Yes, I was a teacher before I was a social worker, so in a couple of different hats in my life.
Well, you know, social work
We all.
comes in handy being a teacher too, for sure.
Absolutely, and an educator for sure.
So how's it going at Royal Roads? Are you settling in?
Yes, I mean, it's only been a few weeks that we've been here, but yes, it's beautiful. I'm surrounded by beauty, so can't complain. We've had quite a bit of rain lately, so waiting for that to kind of, which apparently
big storm, eh? Big storm blowing in. Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. Hasn't been so much storm, just rain really, but a little bit of wind, but not too bad.
Where are you, Tracy?
I'm at Royal Roads University in Victoria on the West Shore.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I just recently moved to take up a Canada Research Chair position here. So,
that was a big move, though. Wow. I mean, you have family that you all moved out, or
yeah, so I've got 3 kids, my partner, my dog, we all drove over here, and
you drove. Oh, good for you.
yeah, so yeah, it's a bit of a change, but the kids I think seem to adapt quicker than us adults do, so yeah,
it is a beautiful place in the whole island. I mean, you got so much to explore, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's so yeah.
May not get quite as cold as we can get here in Ontario.
Yes, exactly. I'm happy to not have to shovel myself out of my driveway.
So did you buy a house?
We're in the process. So we're just actually our house should be closing tomorrow.
Great.
In London. And once that's done, then we're going to start looking. So we're just living on campus right now, which is
nice. Okay.
A little house in the woods, which is
really
yeah.
I've never been to Royal Roads, but I've seen pictures. Like Dad, they have. I mean, basically, the main building is like a castle. It looks like
it is a castle.
Yeah.
It is a castle. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, they shot the X-Men here actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's a claim to fame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How old are your children, Tracy?
17, 14, and almost 11. Okay. So all girls.
It'll be a change for them too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, my eldest is like just finishing up a couple of credits and then she's moving on to hopefully go to university somewhere. And the other one's just starting high school
Oh,
and
right.
just starting middle school. So actually it's a good time in terms of
Yeah, right.
transitioning because they're just starting in those schools. So yeah, not too bad. I mean, the eldest is like feeling like she's going to miss her graduation, but she's already said she's going to go back and, celebrate with her friends. And so
Yeah.
we'll work around that.
COVID really influenced so many things too in the last, obviously, year and a half around graduations, etc.
Exactly. Well, and just open the door to recognize that you can still keep in touch with people from large distances. That we do regular Zoom calls with our family, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It has helped. I mean, it's forced me to learn, and I still require Pat's able assistance on occasion, but
On occasion.
really on a regular occasion.
right.
But I do like it. I've got, I can see there's a reason to do it by Zoom, and I it's good. It's better than FaceTime. I don't like FaceTime. I don't know. I think I look better on Zoom. Maybe that's a problem. FaceTime, I look at myself and go, "Oh, is that me? Who is that old woman?"
I think FaceTime is pretty primitive by comparison with Zoom. Zoom's pretty sophisticated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Not bad technology. Although I think still, I much prefer if I can do in-person meetings, I much prefer them. Especially going to conferences and things like that. I just don't see the value really in networking when you're on a screen. It's just a lot harder.
Yeah, I've just been chair, really since COVID came out. And there are many people on our board that I had not before the summer, I had never met in person. And it's hard to develop any kind of a relationship with somebody when you're just doing it on screen, for sure.
Right.
But in January, when the wind is blowing, maybe we'll have a Zoom meeting because it's more convenient.
Yes, well, and by then they say they're going to have boosters out for everybody. So
Right. I think we'll always do a bit of Zooming. It only makes sense. I mean, how could we have Tracy if?
That's it. That's it. It would have been a long drive back for her.
yes, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's Charles coming.
Hey.
Hi, Charles.
I just was on a Zoom meeting with Charles, for heaven's sake. So you see, we just do this Zoom after Zoom.
Yeah. This is how a lot of people spend their lives now.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Charles, this is our great speaker tonight, Tracy Smith Carrier, and this is
Hi,
Charles
Tracy.
McDonald, a very great member of our community and interested in helping people.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
He's a go-getter. If you want something done, put it on Charles' plate. He'll get it done.
Oh, that's
Faster than me, Pat. Do you believe that? Faster than me.
Yeah. Anyhow, how is everybody?
Good.
But Tracy just moved out west. So we were talking about that big move. Have you been to Vancouver, Victoria area, Charles?
I've been to Victoria on the work project, but that's the only thing actually. I lived in Calgary for a total of 8 years.
Oh, okay.
Love it out west.
yeah, it's beautiful, eh?
Oh yes.
Rockies. Hmm.
Actually, we'd be in the valley now if it weren't for our daughter. I shouldn't blame that on her, should I? That's not right.
Well, you 2 grandchildren, that helps. There's Roz coming on too.
Yeah.
Barb. Now, Tracy, we have 26 people signed up to join us, but I've been finding that when people register, they don't always turn up on the call. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I find attendance really can vary.
Yeah. Sometimes it's, yeah. So anyway,
Sometimes it surprises you and other times you're like, what happened?
yeah.
Wow.
Where'd everybody go? Yeah.
And you know, we're gonna really listen. You've got a good audience, even if it's just a few, just so you know, Tracy.
Oh, it's awesome. Thank you.
Well, we've had an interesting, this is the third in a series. And so the first one was actually a speaker from BC as well, from the island, actually, Kara Pike, who's an environmentalist talking about local climate change action. And then last week we had a gentleman from Kitchener-Waterloo who runs a nonprofit affordable housing organization, which is fascinating. Him talking about how he puts these projects together and brings all different kinds of groups in. So we're hoping that will inspire some. The more we learn, the more we'll inspire some action. So yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This is exciting times. There's a lot of innovative things going on. A lot of new programs and things for sure.
yeah, there's no doubt about that.
I can see Pete there.
Lots happening. You can spread yourself pretty thin.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
there is.
COP26 starts this weekend, so that'll be interesting to see if anything positive comes out of that. That's a bit of a worry, but
What starts this weekend?
I know.
oh, sorry, the International Climate Change Conference in
Oh,
Glasgow.
okay.
Yeah, and yeah, everybody's holding their breath, just hoping that something,
Mm.
something comes out of it. But they say it's not looking great so
No.
far.
where is it being held, Pat?
Glasgow.
Okay.
Isn't that where Mr. Biden's on his way to?
Yes, and also Mr. Trudeau.
Is Mr. Trudeau? I hadn't heard that yet. Okay.
Yeah, I heard actually that he's making a couple of other stops, but he'll be there, I think, by the end of the weekend.
Oh, that's good. Good to
Hi,
know.
Pete.
I'll
Well,
have
you
to
remember
do
him
it
and
later.
Harris saying we're back.
Good evening.
And yet we haven't done anything yet, so we'll see what he does
No.
this time. Hi, Pete. Hi, Barb. And then there's some guy named Max Morden in there too. Hi, Joelle.
Are you related to that Max Gordon guy?
What did you say? No, I'm not related. No, that's against the law.
That's cute. And Tracy, Max is Pat's husband. You probably know that, but hi, Max. We were talking about some illegal,
Hey,
there's
guys.
Barb.
Activity.
Hey, John. Hey, Barb.
Hey, John, Barb,
Hi, Pete.
Joelle. Yeah. Joelle hasn't joined.
We'll wait 3 or 4 more minutes, I think, Pat. Is that okay with you?
For sure,
Tracy?
yeah. Yeah, I'd
Absolutely.
say I go 5 if you, yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, okay, I'll go 5.
Deb, did you leave that couch since the last time I saw you?
No,
No.
well, I wanted John to bring me dinner, but he didn't, Roz, so I had to go out and make us dinner. So yeah.
Ours is in the oven.
Yeah. So what was kind of neat, I had to go outside for just a quick minute from the church, and there was a young man rollerblading, not rollerblading, skateboarding. And he said, "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a moment?" And he was the young man who found the money in our open parking box this summer. And he didn't know that we had actually received it. Because
Oh.
he didn't give us a name or number and in his note, and he just smiled such a big smile when Bob and I really thanked him. Ended up in a really nice conversation. And so we said, "Well, you're welcome to come anytime." And then he says, I said, "You don't happen to play a musical instrument?" He says, "Yes, I'm really good on drums." So, and my mom's a music teacher. She went to university for music. So I went and got my card and gave it to him. He said, "You'll be in touch."
Lovely. Hi, Brian. We tend to meet a lot, Brian, on Zoom, don't we? Yes,
we can barely
Tracy.
hear you.
You can barely hear me?
No,
No,
Brian.
Brian.
Oh, God, we
Tracy,
can hear you
I don't know
across
if that's a
town.
good thing or bad thing.
Pat, Tracy wants to share her screen on and off throughout the
Oh,
evening.
yeah, right. Sorry, I said I would have that set up and I did, and I don't, of course. There we go. Do you want to give it a try, Tracy, and see if it works?
It looks like I can. Thank you.
How long have you been out in Vancouver, Trace?
It's been, well, since last month.
Oh,
Not long,
no, not really.
no.
Have you felt any effects of that bomb? That tornado bomb? No, none, so, eh?
No, no. Yeah, I just keep waiting for it to happen, but no.
Oh,
Just, there was a little bit of wind, some, quite a bit of rain, but no.
you didn't have to get your own personal sea container, did you, by any chance? There's a whole bunch of floating around out there.
No, no.
Okay,
Doesn't look promising, Pat.
yeah, Pat's making me wait till 5 minutes after 7 and it's only 7:03, so we have to hang in there.
This is a characteristic of, I'm sorry, but small towns, that everybody arrives early and meetings start, they never start late. They always start like a couple minutes before. And that was something I had to learn the hard way. Whereas in the big city, you almost plan on arriving 15 minutes late for a meeting, right? Like in Toronto, it's like everybody sort of has the traffic as an excuse, so you don't have to ever turn up on time. But good.
It's not usually an excuse. It's generally that you're
Well,
late.
generally the truth, yeah. But you see why, Deb?
Pardon me?
Lots of people joining, so.
Yeah, I see that.
Hello.
There's Linda and Ron, hello.
Hi.
And I
Hi,
think
guys.
Bob is there and Paul is there.
Mhm.
Roz disappeared behind the emblem logo.
She's there.
Yes, I
here.
know.
Let's see.
I think, hi, Paul. I think it's made me more characteristic of age group. We found, when I retired, we went down to Florida to an area, and I couldn't believe how everybody's there like 20 minutes early to get the best seat or something crazy. It's like, yeah.
Seniors, put food on the menu, you'll be there half hour early.
That's it. That's what we need to do. Hard to promote that though through Zoom. I'm not sure how we do it.
If someone could figure out how to provide food through Zoom, I mean, we'd be away to the races. We'd have a lot, huge events.
You wouldn't have
Well,
enough room on the street.
I think we should begin. And Pat, I know you're going to be watching to have people come in. It's been so great to have Tracy, and even in the short time we've chatted. Dr. Smith Carrier has pursued a career in researching a number of fields within the social policy arena, including access to social welfare benefits, social assistance receipt, food and income security, and basic income. All of these social issues surround the problem of poverty. Learning more about these critical issues will inform us on how to build back better. Welcome, Tracy. We're thrilled that you're with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm just going to share my screen, if you don't mind. Let's quickly do that. There we go. And normally I like to start out with a case scenario to just get us thinking. So Anne was born in a small city in Southeast Canada. And I know as an educator, I'm not supposed to overcrowd my screen with lots of text, and this is exactly what I've done, but I have to in order to read the story. Okay, so she was born in a small city in Southeast Canada. Her parents divorced by the time she was 5, and by that time she had moved 4 times. Her father moved outside of Canada looking for work, and her mother floated in between part-time jobs as there was little funds to pay for childcare. Anne's mom obtained their clothing from a used clothing bank. Sometimes the clothes were nice, other times they were old and dated. She can still remember receiving her first pair of new jeans at age 12. Anne started working part-time after school at age 13 so she could make some money and buy a few of her own clothing items so she could at least attempt to fit in. Anne and her mother regularly received assistance from United Way and Goodwill. And when she was young, she didn't mind receiving hand-me-downs and the big box of goodies at Christmas. But as she got older, she started to despise having to receive them. She felt like charity. She felt like people wanted to make themselves feel good by giving her the things they didn't actually want for themselves. The food from the food banks was yucky. She didn't always want to eat beans or canned cream corn. She wanted fresh food. She wanted to go into the kitchen and not have to think for several minutes about what she could make with the few items in the fridge. She didn't want to invite friends over as she wouldn't be able to serve them anything to eat. The welfare check was never enough. The family lived in a city housing project rent geared to income. They didn't have a car and had to take a cart to the grocery store down the street. Sometimes the canned items fell through the bags and landed in the middle of the busy road, and Anne would have to run into the traffic to retrieve them. Her mother was stressed out. Anne became stressed out. She developed insomnia and anorexia. She knew she would work hard to get out of this mess, but how? So a couple of questions here to consider, and I'll just maybe move out of screen share just briefly. I think we can all say this is a fairly unique situation. What are some of the things that could be done to help this family?
We could provide basic income so they wouldn't have to depend on charity. More dignified.
Basic income to provide, yes, exactly. Because I think even as most of us were probably thinking, a lot of us go to the same, charitable solutions, right? Which clearly the family didn't really want, is charitable solutions to the issues they were experiencing. And so that actually is my story. I'm Anne, that's my middle name. And I would say that the way I ended up getting out of poverty was basically through a basic income, in that when I was at the age of being able to receive loans and bursaries and scholarships in university, I was able to do so. And it allowed me to get an education, became a teacher, an educator at the Toronto District School Board, and later became a social worker and pursued a career in doing policy work. So moving back into, going back into the screen share, here we go. All right, one of the things as a poverty researcher that I hear all the time, which kind of bothers me actually, is the notion that poverty is complex. And I'm not to say that there isn't complexities to poverty, but if we are going to define poverty as a lack of financial resources, and I understand this is a narrow definition of poverty, if we actually gave people those resources, financial resources, they would then no longer experience poverty. If we make poverty into something that's so complex that it's insurmountable, then we'll never be able to do anything about it. So I think that's one of the things that I want to leave, is that it's not so complex that we can't do something about it. It's not inevitable. In fact, there are countries who have made significant strides in eradicating poverty. So for example, to be Danish is to live a life without poverty. You can see here that their child poverty rate is 2.9%. And the overall poverty is basically less than 6%. And largely those figures are related to immigrants that have moved into Denmark, but haven't yet been absorbed into the economy there. So some of the immigrants there are experiencing poverty, but to be Danish means to be not living in poverty. And other countries, as you can see, are faring a whole lot better than Canada is in relation to poverty. So in the context of COVID, we see that food security insecurity is on the rise. A lot of small businesses have been decimated, mass layoffs, certainly adverse health and mental health for folks, increased violence against women and children, or reports of violence against women and children. And of course, these costs are disproportionately borne on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC populations. So going back to what we talked about at the beginning there in terms of charity, when we consider how many food insecure households, so these are households that are experiencing hunger, how many households that are food insecure actually go to food banks? Anybody want to hazard a guess in terms of an estimate of how many households use a food bank?
Probably less than 40%.
Less than 40%. Any other guesses?
I guess I thought it would be higher than that because it seems like you wouldn't go hungry if you could get food. So I would have said maybe 70%.
I myself think it's probably less than 20. Oh, there you go.
There we go, 21.
I get-
21.1. Now these are stats before COVID. So I think the urgency around the situation, like Pat was saying, I think the urgency now when food insecurity is on the rise, there may be a lot more people going to food banks because they actually can't survive. But prior to COVID, basically 21.1. This is work by Valerie Tarasic from the University of Toronto, looking at Canadian statistics. 21.1% of folks that are experiencing food insecurity go to food banks. So how effective is a system that excludes roughly 80% of the people needing its services? Because that's essentially what we're looking at, is 80% of the people that really need food banks will never step foot into a food bank. So one of the ways to get around this, because obviously it's highly stigmatized, it's an experience of shame for people. For some people, they'd rather starve than to go there. So what are some more dignified ways to approach food or food and income security? Because food insecurity is about income. It's all about income. If people had money, they would buy their food. That's how we get food here in Canada. So the way to get at food insecurity is really to get to people's issue related to poverty. So basic income is really the principle behind basic income. And there's different views about what it looks like and how it's offered. And we can get into the nuances in a minute, but essentially the basic income guarantee is a payment made to individuals to ensure they have income security. It's based on the premise that everybody should have the right to an adequate standard of living. So in terms of the principles surrounding this, and this is essentially what folks at the Basic Income Canada Network and the Ontario Basic Income Network have come up with in terms of principles that would inform a good, decent basic income guarantee, a big. One is that it has to be adequate and it needs to be enough money to live on so that people, regardless of work status, should be able to live on it. So if you're disabled and can't work, or if you're caregiving and can't work, for whatever reason you can't work, you can live on it. It should provide autonomy, so it gives people more choices, offer dignity, no stigma attached. And the beauty of it is that it could be done through the tax system so that nobody knows who gets and who doesn't get a basic income. It provides equality of opportunity, offers opportunities for folks. It's non-conditional. There's no strings attached to it. So unlike welfare programs that have 600 rules attached to them, there's no conditions on this about whether you're working, about your kids being in school, whatever, you get it. And then universality of access. This is another one of contention for some. For most folks that are advocates of a basic income guarantee in Canada, they believe that anyone who needs it should get it. Now, the type of basic income that's being advocated for in the United States by people like Andrew Yang, for example, believe in a basic income that's a Demogrant model flat rate. Everybody gets it in society and everybody gets the same amount of money. Now, that's not what most people hear who are advocating for a basic income. There are some, of course, but most people believe that it should really be dependent on your income. So if you have a lot of income, you won't get basic income. But if you don't have a basic income, that it really is tied to your residency. As long as you're a resident in Canada, you should be able to receive a basic income. Now, why do it? Because it works. There have been lots of projects around the world that have adopted the basic income approach. We, of course, have had the Mincome project in Manitoba. You might have heard of that project. It ran from 1974 to 1979. Evelyn Forget was the researcher that went back and did the analysis on that program, and basically found that in less than a 4-year span, they were able to see a decrease in hospitalization rates by almost 10%, 8.5% in 4 years, which, I mean, healthcare is huge dollars, huge expenditures for health and social care. So to be able to decrease by that much in such a short period of time does speak to some efficacy. There was less crime. There were fewer reports of domestic violence. There was a higher completion of high school, secondary school rates, improved mental health outcomes. So overall, there's some significant research indicating that this was an effective program. But also, there is research from around the world. Now, they don't necessarily use the search term. If you put it in your Google Scholar, for example, and you put in basic income, you probably get a few hits there, more so now because we're talking about it a lot more. But earlier, people used to use the terms conditional or unconditional cash transfer programs, which have been tried around the world. Latin America, for example, has been a big proponent, largely on the conditional cash transfer model. Things like, we'll give you cash if you make sure your kids go to school, if they get vaccinated. They put conditions on it, but essentially it's a transfer to families. Places in Africa, India, Alaska, British Columbia, Ontario, of course, we had our own pilot before Doug Ford dismantled it. And we're in the process actually where we were able to get a SSHRC grant, and we're doing analysis on some of the outcomes from that pilot project. So lots of empirical support for actually just transferring people money. The two main arguments that we hear all the time and across society, one is the work disincentive argument. Essentially, it's this notion that if you give people money, they're just going to, sit on their tush and not do anything. They're lazy and they don't, want to work, right? This is the notion behind this work disincentive, which actually, economists, everybody has built all these models around this notion of work disincentives. However, when we look at it and when we look at the evidence from these pilots and from these programs across the world, there's actually no evidence to support it. People don't stop working. In fact, if you give people money, like they did in Manitoba, it actually put some pressure on the employers to give higher wages. Why? Because people could say, I'm not going to go to your crappy job. I'm going to stay, have my basic income, and look for a better job. Well, the employers had to up their game and give better wages. And so that's what happened. It improved the employment, and it also improved the economic activity in the area. It also improves for people who would like to be entrepreneurs and want to start a business. They'll actually have an income to be able to do so. However, there are some calculated decisions that people make. For example, CERB, right? When people were getting a form of basic income through the CERB, what we found was personal support workers did the calculation and realized that actually they'd be making less money to be working in their sites than to be getting the CERB. So what ended up happening? They had to increase the wages of personal support workers. So we see it again through the CERB. It increases wages because people will say, I'm not going to do that job if it's a crappy job and you're not going to pay me. I'd rather, so it actually can have really positive benefits, actually. Well, the other argument that we hear, so there's the one, the work disincentive, and the other one is the cost. It's going to cost way too much money. We don't have enough money, right, to do this. This is the one we hear all the time. However, Canada is an extremely wealthy country, and we are the only G7 country that doesn't actually impose wealth taxes, inheritance taxes, gift taxes, estate taxes. We tax more on income than we do on capital gains and dividends. We have obviously issues with tax havens. and loopholes in our tax system. We are ranked one of the lowest of G7 countries for corporate tax rates. In fact, we've actually seen our corporate tax rates be halved over the last 20 years. So we get less money. And so Donald Trump, when he was in power, was looking to Canada to get our corporate tax rate and bring it to the United States. So we certainly have money. Not only that, but the system we have now is extremely costly. And we regularly don't talk about that. The fact that we actually have a system that creates poverty and all the health and social problems that accompany it. And having that is a very, very expensive system. So what they found when they looked at the United States, for example, was that in 2011, there was about 50 different poverty programs running in the United States, about $500 billion. If they just pooled the money together and distributed it, it would have been enough to lift every single American over the poverty line. So again, this notion of we don't have enough money, it's not that we don't have the money, it's just that we're not using it in the right way, right? We're using it on programs as opposed to actually giving it to people. And that's what needs to happen. This notion, again, we can see it in housing. It's a lot cheaper to not have people be homeless, right? Like if we have people in institutional forms of care, that's really expensive. To have people in shelters, in jails, in hospital beds, those are expensive options. But if we actually support social housing projects, rent to income, those forms of housing are a lot cheaper. So it's just cheaper to give people homes than it is to maintain homelessness. And in the same regard, we could say it's a lot more expensive to keep poverty than it is to actually address it. Can we afford it? We, as our GDP on social expenditures, we are one of the lowest, as you can see here. All these other countries top us. France is double the spending, and Finland almost double the spending than we have on our expenditures for social care. So we're one of the lowest, and certainly we have the money to be able to do it. We just need the willpower. Have we been able to make strides in poverty alleviation before, and for whom? Do we already have forms of basic income in Canada, and can we learn from those situations and those populations? Well, we have different forms of basic income, and we can see from in the past. So for example, looking at older adults' poverty over time, in the early 1970s, when we were just starting to see the effects of instituting the guaranteed income supplement on old age security, combined with CPP, that elderly poverty was almost at 40% at one point, and it dropped down to 3.9%. We had essentially eradicated poverty for that population by the 1970s. Now, you're saying, well, poverty for older adults is certainly on the rise. And yes, I would agree. Poverty is on the rise, largely because those programs, the way they've indexed those programs are problematic. They've tied them to prices and not wages. And so there's an indexation problem that is ensuring that then those programs are not meeting basically the cost of living. But at one point we had eradicated it, and essentially that 3.9% was essentially immigrants who hadn't met the 10-year residency requirement to gain access to those programs. So we did it for seniors at one point. And we were also starting to see a bit of a reduction in poverty over time, largely in relation to one population. And that is in relation to families because of the Canada Child Benefit. So over the last couple of years, we have converted our Canada Child Benefit from a Demogrant flat rate model to one based on income tested model. So folks that have low incomes are seeing a supplement to their incomes, enough so that some of those folks are actually getting enough to bring them over the poverty line. We actually have a poverty line now that was introduced. We didn't have one before. It got introduced to the federal poverty reduction strategy. We now use the market basket measure. Most poverty researchers scratched their heads. Why did you use that one? Nobody else was using it, but we won't get into the arguments about that. But anyways, we've got the market basket measure. We now actually have a poverty line in Canada. And some reductions, largely because we have a basic income, a form of the basic income for families through the Canada Child Benefit. So essentially, basic income cannot solve every social problem. It is not a panacea. It can, however, solve income security, poverty, and a lot of the symptoms around poverty. When we think about homelessness and food insecurity, all of these things are interrelated. And so if we did actually provide people financial resources, we could essentially alleviate poverty, eradicate poverty if we chose to do so. One of the people that I really like listening to, I'm not going to, do it now, but direct you to Rutger Bregman, who he does actually believe in a universal basic income, the Andrew Yang version of basic income, but he has a really good talk on poverty isn't a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. He's got a couple of TED Talks actually. So I'd recommend checking those out because they're really quite informative. And then a couple of things in terms of resources. The Basic Income Canada Network has a primer series, if you're interested in learning about the different aspects of basic income. You can check out their website, basicincomecanada.org. And then Coalition Canada is a group of chapters from across Canada that are advocating for a basic income. So they have a number of resources on their website as well. So you can take a look at those resources. Are there questions?
So I have a pretty obvious question, I guess. What can we, where are we at with this and how can we make basic income happen? I mean, you're very persuasive, although I was already persuaded, but what do we need to do is it a question of advocacy?
It's absolutely a question of advocacy. I mean, there are some, the Liberal Party, there's a number of people in the Liberal Party who are advocates of basic income. The Green Party adopted it, I don't know, 20 years ago. They've been big proponents of it. There are a number of people that aren't aware that they need to be better informed. There have been some setbacks. For example, the BC government decided to set up an expert panel on a basic income a few years ago. And of course, they got 3 economists, very conservative economists on this panel, and they came out saying that basic income wasn't going to be helpful. There's really questionable methodologies attached to their research. It was really more an opinion paper than anything. But that for BC was like, well, okay, our experts have weighed in and therefore, we don't want it. So there's some resistance there. But I think a lot of folks in power really just don't know enough about it. So it's trying to build some awareness and also awareness in the community so that people can put pressure on their politicians to adopt this. When I talked to my local politician when I was in London, the response I got was, yeah, we see it coming. It is probably coming, but it's probably 10 years down the road. So keep up the advocacy. That was the message I got, which is like, thanks. It's like we kind of know that it's going to be necessary, and particularly in a context of climate change, precarious work. Like we know where we're headed here, and we know that in some ways, some people said that basic income will be inevitable because we have nothing. We have no security in this current market. But we need it now. We need to get it now. There are people really suffering now. And so even, the basic income pilot project, we're getting some of the results back on that. Like most of the people in the pilot were planning on going to school. They had to, get their tuition money back. Some of them got booted out of their social housing. There were suicides. It was awful. It's been really, really awful. So I guess it's also not only advocating for, like, I'm kind of tired of the pilots. Like, I don't want another pilot. We want a program that's not going to be, the next whim of the next government can be dismantled. We want a program that's, embedded, kind of like our healthcare system. We've embedded in it, in our structures and our systems, and we need it to move forward. Mm-hmm.
I guess one more question about that. So let's say tomorrow our federal government said, yeah, we're doing basic income. So how do we have the structures through the income tax system to figure out who needs it? And yeah,
we definitely do. Yes, we are. We already do, because we do it for some of these programs already.
Right.
So the infrastructure is definitely there to be able to do it. It would actually as well potentially help folks start filing taxes. We know that there's been an issue in the past, particularly with people in low income who feel like they think they're going to owe the government a lot of money, so they avoid paying filing their taxes, when in reality they actually are probably sitting on a windfall of money, but they don't want to file because they're of that fear. So if there was that money there, and this is why we're starting to see tax clinics that are being set up all over the place to try and get people to file their taxes, because it actually will help them. If we did it through this system where, we were filing taxes, certainly we were able to do it very, very quickly in relation to COVID, when we were able to set up the CERB, get out those payments of $2,000 a month very, very quickly.
Right.
We can do it. There's no question about it, that we can do it. It's the matter of willpower. Yeah.
Tracy, hi. It's Joelle. I just I have a question. So locally we're moving into Living Wage Week coming up, and so in a lot of our recovery conversations and housing issues and workforce concerns that we have in here in Perth, from the perspective that we have more jobs than we have people, but very precarious employment, right? So how do we change the dialogue amongst the economic sector here in our workforce sector? Because the real feel here is that people just don't want to work. And CERB is paying too much money, so people don't want to work. And I feel like the socialist in the room, and nobody will want to talk to me because I'm going to go and get on my soapbox and do my thing. And
I feel like that too all the time, Joelle.
Well, good. But I'm just wondering, how do we start that locally? Because basic income is a federal potentially. I know PEI's got some efforts going with the federal, provincial, and municipal levels to do a basic income. But how do we have the conversation about what's really happening here and start introducing, obviously we've been talking about basic income for a long time, but we can introduce that. But how do we get people to think differently when we're talking about this locally?
That is actually the question that I've been asking for a long, long time. And hence the reason why we started doing poverty simulations, and because I was like, how do we shift people's mindsets about poverty? Because I mean, I think there's a lot of myths around poverty that we really need to debunk. So a lot of education that needs to take place. And in some cases, people have to experience things for them to shift their mindset, or at least this is some of the research we're finding. And even being aware of these things and having knowledge, maybe being able to change your mind about something doesn't necessarily lead to action, is the other thing we learned. So that it's tricky. I think the more we develop that education and the awareness, the better. The more conversations we're having, whether that's just around our dining room table, but also in our school system. My daughter takes a social justice club, and she says, "Mom, we haven't talked about poverty at all. Like at all in her classes." So I think, yeah, those are, but you know what, in the long term though, those companies might be saying that. But if they're going to stay in those communities, which we hope that they will be, they might actually have to step it up and do better, which isn't a bad thing, right?
No, and I think right now there's actually the hugest opportunity ever to start the conversation in a different way, even changing our narrative around housing development, because here, anything that isn't a single detached home is considered, oh no, we can't possibly do that. That would be horrible, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do think we're in a point in time where people are getting, employers and the municipal governments are getting, really exhausted and trying to figure this out. So I actually think there's the opportunity now
Yes.
to have these types of conversations, so long as we link it to, evidence and to reality, obviously, right? The stories, we're seeing it everywhere.
Exactly. And if you asked most people, they would say, yes, the system is broken. Now, if you ask them what the solution is, you're going to get 50 different responses. But yes, like you said, it should be based on evidence, what we know works, right?
So Pete, did you have a question? You're muted, Pete.
I remember reading an article from Denmark, and their solution was more broader based, where
Yeah.
they combined affordable housing to education, and the education was in, basic skills, cooking skills, right to journeyman skills and higher education. So they linked, like, not just a living wage, but they linked it with 6 other programs. So it was really more a full comprehensive moving forward. So
Yeah.
really to try to take people who may need assistance out of that to have a job. And then once people have jobs, they feel better about themselves and that they can kind of get out of the, so it was a holistic approach versus just the one focal point. What do you say about that?
Yes, absolutely. And I would agree with you. The Scandinavian countries have basically cradle to grave policies, right? Where they have daycare, they have, full-fledged childcare programs, free post-secondary education programs. They have, their education is like the best in the world, and largely because they really tap into the natural strengths of the child. It's more holistic. They don't have a basic income, but they haven't really needed to because they have such high rates of unionization. Even the folks at McDonald's are unionized, so they have ways to bargain for better wages. They don't have the same, negativity surrounding unionization that we have here, and some of the issues that they have, that we have in our unions now. There is much more. The electoral system is different. Like, culturally, so there are some really big differences in the way they do it. I guess my point was more to the fact that it's not inevitable that we have to have poverty, that there are solutions, there are ways that we can go about it. And yes, there are a number of really big things that we need to be doing. One is looking at housing, because the housing market is out of control. So having better regulation for housing is one piece. Basic income is another. I heard you were talking about living wages. So living wages is another approach. Living wages tend to be more employer driven though. So that for me, because they're voluntary and they're through employers, it's one way, but for me, it's not the best way. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, we need to have good minimum wages, maybe start talking about maximum wages. I think that's where we need to go. We need to address the inequality. The fact that people can hold vast amount of wealth is creating poverty for people.
Wow, any other questions out there, folks?
Yes, I'd like to ask Tracy, the benefits you showed from this program, a basic income, such as reduced health care, do you think those benefits could pay for the program itself?
Yep, I do. Just
Wow.
like Quebec's, what they found with Quebec's daycare system was that it paid for itself. We would, I think the costs, we would easily be able to first of all, pay for the program, and yeah, that it would pay for itself. Absolutely.
So you wouldn't have to worry about increasing those taxes you showed, wealth and inheritance, all that, which could ruffle a few feathers, I think.
It could ruffle a few feathers, but I think it also addresses some of the inequality that we're seeing, right? We're talking about people with, we're not talking middle class, we're talking people with huge amounts of money that really, like just even going after the tax havens, right?
Oh, yeah.
Getting actually people to pay their taxes.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone
It's
else?
high- It's
Oh,
high time
Charles?
it's high time some of those feathers were ruffled actually, because the disparity is getting larger and larger and larger. The middle class is disappearing,
Yeah,
the lower class is growing, and the upper class is getting smaller, but exponentially richer. When you talk about, just as an example, Ian Husk and Bezos are worth together
Yep.
more than $500 billion.
yes.
Two men.
Yeah.
That's it.
Elon Musk, actually, if you met the UN SDGs as
Yeah.
Sustainable Development Goals of $1.90 a day, but we can complain about the $1.90 a day, which is absolutely absurd. But to meet that they estimate is about $182 billion. You could still leave Elon Musk with $50 billion and basically bring everybody up in the entire planet based on Elon Musk alone.
That's right.
It's absolutely astronomical how much money these people are making. And we have no regulations about that, right? If they're hoarding the wealth, and it's a real problem. We need to do something about it.
Can you talk a little bit about what you said about housing regulation too? Tracy, I was really interested in that. Like, I mean, obviously we're all, well, a lot of us are thinking about affordable but how we might be able to create affordable housing. But you're saying that we should have some like laws around it, or I just wonder what you meant.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think most people these days are using housing as an investment as opposed to using it as a place to live. So yeah, we need better regulation to curb some of that. I mean, I know they've made some changes to try and dissuade some foreign investment that we're just basically coming in and absorbing. But a lot more could be done to ensure that that we actually have a future, that my children could actually afford to buy a house. I mean, I'm currently living in Victoria, where the starting price of a home is $1 million. Like $1 million to get into a market. Like, this is not sustainable. There are things you can do to curb that.
Max, did I see your hand there? Max?
Yes, Tracy, I was just wondering, what would a reasonable basic income be? Like when you talk about the poverty line, what are we talking about in terms of numbers here? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so for me, the one of the main things is that it has to be adequate. So it has to, at least for me, be above a poverty line, which if we're going to use our market basket measure as our poverty line, which that's what the federal government wants to use, it should be at least that.
How much would that be? What is that?
It's okay. So it was actually less than what they did in the Ontario pilot by almost a quarter. But we could potentially use $2,000 a month CERB as a benchmark.
Okay.
There could be there'll be a lot of differences and opinions on how we want to structure it. Some people think it should be regionally based on a cost of living for, living in Toronto is not the same as living in, somewhere in Thunder Bay. So some people are very much, do like more of a regional approach. Some people just like the idea of everybody having access to the, a same amount in terms of, being on the same level, which is what they did with the Ontario basic income pilot and the Manitoba income experiment. So yeah, the way we design it could vary, but it has to be adequate for it to be a basic income. And for me, that would include indexation. It needs to be adequately indexed to wages so that that those benefits, just like we see in the guaranteed income supplement, old age security, those really are becoming eroded with time. So we need those protections as well.
So if you look at the Income Canada there, they're suggesting, okay, around $20,000 a year for a single person as a basic income.
Mhm.
The poverty line in Canada right now for a single person is projected 13,200, and for a family of four, it's 24,000 is the poverty line, is what they're saying in Canada. So it's a long way.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just cut you off there, Tracy. I saw Robert had his hand up. Did you have a question there, Robert?
Yeah, it seems to me that the most expensive part of any individual's living seems to be housing. And, you know, if you go to any measure of it, they say you got a job, they say, make sure your housing is within 30 to 40%, no more than that, of your wage. So it is a very large part of any support program. So, and then there's the other side of the coin, which is who is going to build the support to the real estate and purchase it, a rental unit at that cost, which, you know, seems very easy to look at the one side, which would be give them a basic income. But how do you get the other side to create that if there's no return for the investor? And that usually means then that you then go in hand to the government and say, can you build this or can you build that? So basically, both programs are going to be from the government, let's face it. And there's just not the basic cost of living. There's lots of big costs there. I think food is a little more flexible than where you can stay. So what I'm really saying is that I heard you talking about a basic income, but I heard you nothing about the infrastructure to create these places for people to live and the extra income to educate them beyond primary school level or high school level. So how do you deal with the other side of the equation?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's basic income is not a panacea. It's not the one policy, so, you know, the magic bullet that's going to wipe out all of our social problems. We still need housing. We still need childcare. We still need those. And I think we need to be advocating for those things. So we need a multi-pronged approach because yes, we do need to talk about housing and the regulations that we need to put into place. And yes, we do need income. So what I'm suggesting is that we're not, you know, forgetting about all those other things. I think those have to be part of the conversation as well. I think, does it have to go through the government? Absolutely, it has to go through the government because they get our taxes. They sit on the hugest amount of money and are able to use it. To download that responsibility to nonprofits, it's totally not realistic. They're overwhelmed. And they only address symptoms. They can't get to the root causes of these things.
Any other questions from the audience here? Yeah, Pete.
One more questions. I think you said earlier, no strings attached. We had one of these sessions from somebody who was doing affordable housing, and they had a complex, and one of the staff people at the housing place was a psychologist to help people deal with their issues, and just kind of no strings attached kind of says, okay, it's hands off. Any thought into supporting that, you know, financial support with other like psychological support?
Yes, but it shouldn't be so I think income security is separate from having supports, right? So people should be able to meet their basic needs, have enough money to pay their bills. What they did in New York City, for example, ran a basic income pilot there, and they actually had 22 conditions attached to the program. And it ended up, they spent all this money tracking down and monitoring people on the 22 conditions, that it ended up being a very ineffective program. I think we can streamline it, get them the money. Now, yes, the supports that people need, we need to have in place. But I don't think we necessarily have to have those things, you know, that they have to go and use that money for those services. I think those services need to be there. I think we need to start talking about embedding mental health care into our healthcare system. So I think those are some bigger questions, just like, you know, having prescription drugs, all of those things need to be in our system. It's actually cheaper to have a healthcare system have prescription drugs in there and mental health care supports in there. But that's a whole other discussion.
And I think you see Charles' hand up there.
Yeah, I think too, as like Robert says, the government, if you don't have a plan, the government can't do anything because they don't think that way. So we have to have a plan for affordable housing. We have to have a plan that includes guaranteed income, that you can go and present a scenario. It's like the affordable housing that they're doing over in the Kitchener area. They came up with a plan. Somebody donated land. Somebody else did this. They put together an action plan and they made it work. Then they went to the government and the government came in. But if you ask the government to do it, it isn't going to get done. They don't really, it's not built, it's not an organization built to help you at all. Call any hotline.
Well, and you know something, I love you that you said that, Charles, because I mean, we are a community foundation and we believe that there's a lot of power in just people in communities coming together and you know, making this change happen. Sure, it has to come from, you know, from above at some point, but it can also, I mean, I think anyway, it can come from below as well. And as you know, from the grassroots and from communities who care about each other, you know.
Right, and the community foundation in Vancouver right now is running its own basic income pilot in BC. And they're showing things for chronically homeless individuals, and they're showing that, you know, they're decreasing rates of alcohol use, drug use, like they're finding all sorts of really great outcomes from that, and that's being run through the community foundation, I think, LEAF project, and it's for social change.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Do we have anyone else looking, asking a question? Did I get everyone?
Can I just say one more thing, Deb? I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you so much, Tracy, for this presentation. It really was wonderful to have you here. And I don't know if everybody realizes how lucky we are to have a Canada Research Chair presenting this research to us. Is pretty authoritative coming from you. And I know that your chair is called the Chair in Sustainable Development Goals and Advancing Sustainable Development Goals. So that's something that the Community Foundation, we're going to start talking about as we go forward, is those SDGs. So it's really been wonderful to have you launch us.
Yes, well, ending poverty is number one.
And I too want to say, Tracy Ann, that it was lovely to listen to you, and you certainly can tell you're a teacher. Thank you so much for all your valuable insights.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thanks everyone for
everyone for
joining
being here.
us. Yeah,
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, Tracy. I was in Stratford. I just came from Stratford, and when I was there, I saw 2 lawn signs saying "Basic Income Now," and I was thinking of your presentation. So I don't know if that's a good sign or not. I don't know if lawn signs are a good thing, but I saw 2 signs saying "Basic Income Now." So
I have that one on my house in the campus here. Because we went to the rally here in Victoria. There was one all over Canada. Rallies all over the place.
You got signs available?
There probably are some signs still available. Basic Income Canada now, or actually Coalition Canada would probably have them still.
Okay,
Anyway.
cool. Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye now.
Bye.